What was the best you have no power here moment you have ever seen? When an unhappy client threatens to go hire a better lawyer. They don't seem to get that this isn't a threat when they aren't paying me. In my professional experience, it is exceedingly rare to be fired by a client you don't want to fire you. I had a rough childhood with a drug addict father. My mom struggled to make ends meet and my first job was paying for the mortgage. After several months of working, again at my first job, I finally had some money to spend on myself and decided to get a computer and a decent internet connection. At the time the best internet I could buy as part of a Dish combo package. I bought a dish and brought it home to install on the house. During this time my dad was still living at home with us but he was hardly there and my parents had all but separated at that point. My dad promptly asked me what I was doing putting a dish on his house. I let him know that I pay the mortgage now and I make the decisions on what we do with the house. I was young but it was a very empowering moment for me. Guess revenge is a dish best served on the side of the house. Hell yeah. When I was working customer service for a restaurant delivery service, not unlike DoorDash, I had a customer send in a complaint about hair in their food. The hair was sitting on top of the food. I checked their account, and they had one order on their account, which is a red flag. I check their phone number and find multiple accounts, each other 1 to 2 orders, all of them complaining about hair in the food. I deny refund because the customer has actually used the same identical photo for the last order since they ordered the same thing. The customer tries to argue with me, threatened to never use the service again, typical stuff that they always say. Eventually the customer gives up and ends the call, then immediately tries again. I get the support request. See who it is, then deny the refund again. She ends the call, then tries again. The person behind me gets the call. I tap the person on the shoulder and show them what I pulled up on my screen and that person denies the refund. The next day she calls back and tries again and is outside of the refund window, so the customer demands to speak to a supervisor. The supervisor bans her from the service for multiple fraudulent refund requests. The customer tries to argue with me, threatened to never use the service again, so we agree. Great. Try once, try twice, try thrice, get banned for life. When my shitty father kicked me out of the house and then demanded he'd have access to my bank to control my financial situation, and I got to tell him, you have no control over me anymore. You set me free when you kicked me out and now you can't do shit. Why would even a psycho like that be dumb enough to think you'd let him do that? Kicks child out of house, no longer has control over child's life, surprised Pikachu face. I worked at a movie theater and some customers were adamant that a staff member had stolen their wallet after they dropped it. Turns out that these people just couldn't see and found the wallet once they actually looked for it. They got irate with literally everyone, from the mall security to the managers to the staff. Mall security finally said, get the fuck out, and the customers went, you can't say that. This isn't your theater, we're customers. Mall security guy promptly said, this is my mall, and I can do whatever the fuck I want. I love that security guard and I hope he gets nothing but the best in life, as he deserves. Absolute king shit. We need more of that. Fuck customer service. I was working as a consultant for a company. There was a bit of a competition between me and this guy. Company starts to have some financial issues, so I leave and start working for a client of theirs. Shortly after joining, they bring in this guy I was competing with at my old job. He was technically my equal, except now I was employed by the client and he was just a consultant. He was trying to one-up me during meetings and my boss told him that decisions are made by the company, not the consultants. It felt good. Reminds me of the I'm the client now line from Mad Men. I have kind of a similar one. I worked for Company A for 6 years before I decided to try something new. When I worked at Company B, I did some very specific things in a very specific field. Company A was having some issues with that topic and gave me a great offer to come back. My second day back we had a meeting about that topic. My VP said I'd take lead on it. A director tried to pull rank, got all pissy, and said his team would handle it and that they didn't need help from my VP or his team. Our CFO stopped him, said Sardines was taking lead, and that if I needed help I was free to reach out to his team. I would have felt a little bad since apparently he didn't know this was the main reason I was brought on, but he was a total asshat, so fuck him. When I was still a child I saw how abusive my grandparents were to my parents when they used to stay in their house during their early years of marriage when they were broke. They are forced to accept the abuse and swallow their pride knowing that they're still indebted to them and had nowhere to go. Once they have enough money to leave my grandparents, they moved to a small rented house. My grandparents came for an unannounced visit and berate my dad for living in such a shanty house and how ungrateful he was for leaving their home. My dad was silent until they start blaming my mother for being a wife that brought bad luck to my dad and how she poisons him into moving to a new home. My dad weren't having any of their bile anymore and kicked them out. They stopped talking until my grandfather was dying of leukemia. My mom was the one who persuaded my dad to see him before he passed. That type of family is the worst. A number of years ago my brother and I decided we were going to move out of state more than halfway across the country. It just so happened that we wanted to go to the same state for totally separate reasons, so we'd still be fairly close to each other. Well, my parents hated our home state, so they decided to move with us so they could be close to us. When they left, about 75% of my dad's side of the family suddenly became very vicious towards them, thinking that my dad abandoned them for various reasons. It's still so bad that several of them refer to my mother as Dad's nameless wife, despite obviously knowing her name, married 20 years, because they blame her for taking him away from the family. If you couldn't tell, many of them are abusive and toxic people who only care about posturing for the rest of the family. I'm not sure if he ever told them that they were a large part of why he hated living in our home state, but I know that none of us has to deal with that toxic atmosphere anymore. Props to your parents. It sounds like they really had each other's best interest at heart. One of my new employees came from a competitor who is, shall we say, not as put together as we are. Her former boss had actually called me to yell at me about poaching his consultants. Which, in and of itself, is weird enough. However, a few weeks after she started, the dude rolled up to our office. He had apparently been calling her to get her to finish an analysis for him and she just ghosted him. I went to the lobby to see what the fuck he was doing here. He started in on me again and then she happened to walk by. I didn't fully understand the conversation, but at one point he literally demanded she do this analysis. She just said, "Or what?" and waited a few beats before turning on her heels and walking away. I did the old hand on his back point to the door universal symbol for leave, or a large security man will make you leave. Never heard from him again. I've got a similar story. Many years ago, we fired a salesperson. She was a compulsive liar and unethical as hell. She was also living under the delusion that the place would fall apart without her, and that we'd be begging her to come back in a couple of weeks. So it didn't sit too well with her when he hired her replacement. His first day on the job, she calls him up to cuss him out for stealing her job. Later that day, she called corporate. I understand their conversation went like this. That bastard's trying to steal my clients. He's going around town telling people he replaced me. Corporate, he did replace you. Harass him again or any other employees and we're calling the cops. That finally convinced her that we weren't going to be begging her to come back. Edit, typos. She just said, "Or what?" and waited a few beats before turning on her heels and walking away. Brilliant. When my manager at McDonald's gets into bitch fights with all the aggressive/toxic customers and booting them out the store by calling them all security if they refuse to leave. actually sounds like a good manager. New CEO came to our department on the first day of his work. He didn't have a pass card yet and a lower level employee told him that he can't enter without pass card. CEO got upset and ordered a worker to let him in, but the worker insisted, "Show me the pass card, or you're not entering." Few days later this worker got a bonus. Sometime in the late 80s I worked at a Walmart warehouse. There was a strict rule: if you didn't have your security badge you could not get in the front door. One day just behind me an older fellow gets stopped by LP for no badge. One of my friends pokes me and points out that the LP guy just refused to let Sam Walton in the door. We all stopped to watch what we assumed was going to be a shit show. To his credit, Mr. Walton stops and goes back to his vehicle and gets his badge, and he thanked the LP guy for following the rules. Did said CEO grant the bonus? Sorry if that's a stupid question. Subscribe for more hot Reddit takes in your inbox, guaranteed.